Hi everyone, and welcome to tonight's British Rowing Lockdown webinar, which is in association with SAS, British Rowing's analytic partner, giving you the power to row. Tonight is a technical spotlight, this time on sweep rowing and coaching in general, and I'm delighted to have Hugo Gallagher and Richard Chambers with us to talk you through the next hour. Those of you that have been on one of our 20 other webinars, it seems like this has been going on for quite a while, but we've had good feedback from it, so we're continuing still. If you've been on it before, you'll know that this session is being recorded, and the recording of the session will be put on YouTube at a later date for you to watch in the future. Also, the questions, if you have any questions as you go through, please just put them on the question pane, and I'll see those, and at the end we'll have a bit of time to kind of pose those to Richard and Hugo. Just one thing, I did email out people that have registered by Monday to ask for questions for tonight. We had over 30 questions given back, which has been fantastic. So what Hugo and Richard have done has found common themes, and are going to talk about those themes tonight. So if your question doesn't get specifically answered, then I apologise for that, and of course I will keep anything that we feel hasn't been answered, and then maybe form a future webinar or give that to people in the future in other ways to kind of get that information back to you. But yeah, I'm really excited to hear from Hugo and Richard, so I won't take up any more of their time. So guys, over to you.
Thanks, Dan. I guess I'll quickly introduce myself, even though I hate doing this. But I'm Hugo Gallagher. I mean, at UL for 5 seasons, became the chief coach back in the autumn in 2019. Yeah, a bit of it with the under 23s as well, like Rich. Yeah, we predominantly sweep, bit of sculling. Yeah, but otherwise I hate talking about myself, so I'll hand over to Rich.
Cheers, Hugo. So my name's Richard Chambers. I currently work at the Oxford Brookes University. I'm the women's coach. Previously, I was at Cambridge, worked alongside or for Steve Trapmore and Rob Baker, and now Brooks work alongside Richard Spratley, Henry Bilhatch-Webb, Ben Murphy, and my brother. Also do some under 23 work alongside or with Hugo and quite a few other coaches from around the country as well. So, you know, thank you so much for getting your questions into us. Hugo, if we could just flick on to the next slide. Hugo's manning the slides this evening. Yeah, thank you so much for sending your questions in. There was such a wide range of questions and so many really good questions that when we went through it, we just tried to find some common themes, as Dan had said. And we've come up with three sort of areas: coaching the basics, coaching multiple crew boats and large teams, and team management. And, you know, hopefully we'll have answered everybody's question to some extent. If we haven't, or if there's anything we've been really unclear about or you'd like a little bit more clarity on, then please just send a message across to Dan or question through to Dan, and hopefully at the end we'll have some time to answer. So, you know, for me and Hugo, we're from programs where there's a large number of athletes. So, you know, it's really important for us that, you know, yes, we look at the technical side of things. We're mainly trying to build physiology and physicality with our athletes, but we also try and keep the coaching quite basic as well, and we try and do the basics really well. And I suppose one thing we wanted to get out of the season, or get out of this evening, was just making sure that we look at those and we revisit those basics again, and just maybe, you know, bounce some ideas off each other, and maybe give you something to go away, food for thought, for whenever you hopefully get back to some rowing again in September, or hopefully even before.
Cool. So we thought we'd start this evening on or coaching the basics, and like Rich said, we've got massive groups. Really, I'm sure some people watching might have a really small 4 or 5 scullers potentially. I think, you know, we run slightly different beasts. With, I know we run 3 to 4 women's and men's 8s, and Brooks is obviously the same but bigger. So something that we thought would start with is how on earth do you get everyone on the same page on day 1 in September? And you know, I feel quite strongly that you don't walk in and give them 75 bullet points on how we're going to row and how amazing we're going to look in July when it comes to Henley. And if I really stripped it back, it would be, for me, it's about pressure on the blade face. And the first thing I'll say when I walk in the gym is if we can get the bottom guy holding the pressure from the start to the stroke to the end of the stroke on the blade face, then he'll be doing a good job. He's the pressure he applies might be nowhere near what the top guy or girl can apply, but pressure on the blade face is pretty much ground zero for me, and we go from there. I don't know about you, Rich.
Yeah, for me, it's probably something similar. After we've talked about sticking to the proper side of the river and kind of cleaning and washing down boats, all of that stuff, probably the first technical point for me is how we grip the handle. And that's something that even as an athlete, I didn't really think massively about. It's actually come from Tim McLaren, when I spent a bit of time with him up at Cambridge, and he talked a little bit about holding handle. And quite often we see athletes arrive in and they think they've got this really relaxed grip. Now I've got a roll of like paper, and what happens is quite often, imagine this is my outside hand, you'll have a lot of athletes will roll in, quite a nice relaxed grip, they'll be in the fingertips. When the blade goes in the water, how can you get pressure on the end of it? Actually making sure you grip the handle properly. Length doesn't come. This isn't effective length. Effective length is something we're going to touch on a little bit later on, but making sure you grip the handle properly and rolling the knuckles around the handle to make sure that you've got a proper grip. You shouldn't really be seeing any air between the thumb and the other part of the hand. The knuckles should be rolled over and making sure you've got a really good solid grip on it. If you think about when you get to a power clean or you do a pull up or you do a bench pull, you don't have this really weak grip. So for me, one of the key technical fundamentals at the start of the season is just making sure that the athletes hold the blade in the right way, because as Hugo says, we want to get them to make sure that they hold the work on the face of the spoon from the start of the stroke to the finish of the stroke. And to be able to do that and to transfer all their physiology, all their power and all their training, they've got to make sure they hold on to the handle correctly.
Yeah.
So that's it.
I was going to ask, is that something you do that on the land, or is it easier coached on the ergo with everyone? How do you do that on the first day?
The ergo is a really important tool for it as well, and you can coach it in the land, you can coach it on the water. You demonstrate with a blade while down at the water. I mean, the rowers, they do so much ergo time that actually you can spend a lot of time just going around the room and it just basically saying grip the handle right. If you've taught them how to do it, they know how to do it. Sometimes athletes get a little bit lazy and in thinking they're trying to stay really relaxed, but just making sure that the work that they do in the weights room and holding the bars correctly is reinforced on the ergo, and then it will transfer onto the water after that. What about you? Like when you're thinking about holding the work in the face of spoon, what kind of stuff are you trying to? What kind of technical stuff are you trying to work with? Have you any sort of drills that you think about?
For me, it's trying to be as simple as possible in terms of putting the power down, so nothing interrupting that, whether it's shoulders, bodies, hips, anything out of line. I think we're going to come on to shoulders in a bit, but yeah, a simple way for me is I'll sit behind our eights in sort of September, October in the launch, and if a blade's rising out the water mid-stroke, I'll be straight onto it, and particularly when they're rowing in sixes, I'll get the pair out to just stare at the blades of those around them or the other guys rowing at that moment. And if they see a blade moving and coming out the water vertically and not staying down and under the water from front to back, and they'll start to learn that what we're trying to do. And then hopefully once they come back in, I think sixes people should row in sixes a lot more than they do, particularly if you're on a crappy river like the Tideway and you've got waves going over your head. Sixes are great, but keeping the blade down, and then up to them learning then what they need to do to keep the blade locked and in the water, and what power transport systems they've got to employ.
Very good. So moving on then. Yeah, should we head to the next one? So there was a lot of questions around the catch and the right way to approach the catch, and it's a really interesting topic and something that actually you could spend a whole webinar itself on chatting on. So how do we prepare? Firstly, how do we prepare athletes to slide forward for a good catch? Well, I suppose for us at Brooks, and with the Brooks women, it's making sure that we keep it really simple. It's really steady. So one of the big things of debate is hand speed off the back end. Personally, I like it to be pretty slow and steady at the start of the season, even having just a really split-second pause. So you take the stroke, count one, move off, and that time allows the crew to gather. It allows them to feel like they've got that finish timing together, so they then can move the hands away together, hands, bodies, quarter slide, and making sure that there is a real degree of separation, at least out to quarter slide. Now, we're all, the British rowing way is to try and get the hips up and over. Quite a lot of the athletes haven't got the flexibility early in the season to do that. But if we can get them to think about moving their hips to at least quarter slide, then I think we're getting into somewhere that we can then move on to be better in the season. But I suppose really simple, slow, steady movements, and for us, just even reinforcing it with some drills. Pauses are such a good way of trying to reinforce these points. Pausing at the back end for longer, pausing hands away, bodies over and quarter slide, and then as the season goes through and you get to December, January, February, and even into summer, you can start to develop those drills to cutting the keck or double recoveries, and just trying to challenge the athletes a little bit further. Hugo, what do you reckon?
I think I agree that anything you do towards the front is dictated by being bloody strong at quarter slide. It's funny, my thinking's changed about quarter slide over the years. I worked in New Zealand about 10, 11 years ago, and everything was about A, B, C off the back, or 1, 2, 3, but A, B, C drills were massive, and I think that was quite Harry Mahon influenced. And then I worked in the US about sort of 5, 6 years ago, and no one seemed to bother with sort of getting well, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3 off the back. Instead, it was just get to quarter slide. They didn't really care how you got there, but they got to quarter slide in a really good position. So it's funny, I guess kind of the British rowing way would be to really drill it in the initial 2 foot of the slide off the back, but essentially both schools have thought the same, which is quarter slide's bloody important. I think like one of my favorite drills in the gym and on the ergs as we're getting ready to go is to have the athletes sit at quarter slide and then walk over and try and push them over. I remember something Steve Gunn did years ago was he used to put a big Swiss ball between 2 rowers on the erg and make them sit at quarter slide and then wrestle over the ball and force themselves to be really strong. And that, I guess that kind of takes all the trunk and core work you're doing in the gym and then vaguely applies it to some rowing positions. Then from there, you're taking that into the boat and trying to say, look, you need to be really set quarter slide, because if you've got a quarter slide, you've got there in an 8 as a group, you've got a pretty handsome chance of then putting the blade in together. So it's funny. I think preparation off the back, a couple of schools have thought about how you prepare to get to quarter slide, but preparation at quarter is everything for me.
Yeah, and it also it's about, yes, you want them to be prepared so that they arrive together, but also with each individual athlete, you want them to try and get into a position where they're in a strong position, not just to deliver their power, but actually helps them stay injury free as well. If athletes are sat in the back of the seat and roll forward with their hips under their shoulders, well, actually, when they load up, all the pressure will go through their back and their discs more. Whereas actually, if they stay up tall, try and stay big in the boat, they've got much more opportunity to use the bigger muscle groups and to deliver much more power, but also stay injury free as well. So I think there's, making sure that you get into that right position is really important for keeping the athletes in one piece as well as power delivery.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Shall I jump to the next slide then as we kind of move through the stroke?
Yeah.
So we had a lot of questions around rotation. Some people talked about whether what to do with your weights, where your arms and shoulders should be, and so we couldn't narrow this down to one question and thought for everyone watching just a discussion about what we do in terms of rotation. And in preparing for this, Rich talked about some really good stuff with having your hands on a bar, which I'd like to hear it again if I'm honest. But yeah, Rich, do you want to share that?
Yeah, thanks for that, Hugo. So I'll bring out my trusty rule again. So again, it's about trying to keep it as simple as possible. And imagine this is my sweep blade. Imagine I'm on bow side, trying to keep a rectangle between the handle, the 2 arms, and the shoulders is a really simple way of doing it, and making sure that your hips can stay central as you roll forward, so that as you roll forward and the hips are central, you get even delivery of pressure on the foot plate. but making sure that as you go up through your torso is rotating more and more, and that the handle will always rotate with the gait, but making sure that your shoulders rotate and stay level with the handle. Now, the inside shoulder may pop up a little bit to let the outside shoulder rotate round. For me, I think that's perfectly okay, as long as it's not somewhere up near your ear, or in your kind of drop round to the one side. But making sure that you keep that rectangle is for me just a really simple way of making sure you keep good rotation. And again, we talked a little bit earlier, Hugo, about what we do in the gym is really important, and working on rotation when you're in a sweep boat isn't enough. Making sure that you work on it in the gym with band work and weighted machines is a really good way of making sure you're keeping your upper body mobile and making sure you can keep some range of motion. Like, if you're moving between the sculling and the sweep quite a bit, scullers are straight up and down. They don't need that rotation element so much. So if they're moving between the sculling and the sweep, they need to make sure that they're doing a lot more rotation exercise and a lot more stretching as well in rotation to make sure that they can adapt between the sculling and the sweep a little bit more.
I guess to put you on the spot a bit, because you rode in the team as a lightweight in the senior team, and you moved between sculling and sweep probably more than anyone else. Was it ever challenging going from the the lightweight double to the 4?
Yeah,
what was the biggest
I think most of the whether you did sculling or sweep was actually everything that the technical stuff to do with sweep, a lot of it was done while working in the S&C gym, and with some really good S&C coaches, and that's why I think that what you do on the land is really important, making sure that we're strong in rotation, working with the physios to make sure we're mobile as well, and we've got good core stability to support any movement in our torso and trunk. Is really important. There wasn't, as lightweights, we were expected to do a lot of sculling between September and April, and then you jump into the 4 or the pair after that. And it would take a little bit of time to get used to it. But because we had such good grinding in the gym, we were able to make the transition probably easier than we would have originally thought.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree on the gym stuff. I think I was reading some of the questions people submitted and thought, and it almost sound a bit arrogant, but I thought I don't really have to worry about the rotation with our athletes. I guess part of that is they're pretty good athletes. They're towards the top athletes in the country. But I think I also really trust our S&C, and because we're strong and we're really strong in the trunk, it's not something we have to worry about too much. They've got really good weight control. They know which foot the weight's going through. Those skills are quite high. And if we're doing 4 S&C sessions a week, that's a lot of technical coaching, if you want to call it that we're doing before we even get in the boat. So I think, again, if people look at their S&C, I don't think rotation should be a problem. And ultimately, for me, that there's a rigger on the side of the boat, and the rigger will take you out in that direction, a bit like you were just showing a couple of minutes ago. So yeah, in some ways, rotation shouldn't. If we're discussing rotation, for me, it's almost got to the point where we're probably too late, and we've got to go right back and peel a few layers back and go, what were we doing wrong when we were squatting in the gym with a bit more weight? How are we moving through our hips and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, and also, it's fair to say that rowing is quite a demanding sport. People will get injured, and actually seeing the injury is not a negative thing. If you see it as a positive, a chance to address some weaknesses, especially with sweep rowers, the common injury is rib problems and rib stress fractures or rib hotspots. Making sure that as soon as your athlete presents signs of tightness in their ribs, tightness in their upper body, or feeling like they constantly need their back to be cracking on a foam roller, just taking the time away from any on water stuff and spending time on the bike, or even just getting back into ergo and moving straight up and down is really important. So it's also an opportunity to relook at how they rotate, how they move, and making sure that in the weights room and in their mobility, they're spending much more time on their rotation as well.
Yeah, and I guess you obviously work with a women's program now. You used to work with the men's program back at Cambridge, and I guess I work with both men and women. Do you feel like we see injuries more in one sex or the other? And from personal experience, definitely feel on the women's side that the chance of getting a rib injury seems higher. There's a few reasons for that. Maybe it's the S&C ability of the athletes when they join, but I don't know if you've seen any trends between the sexes.
I mean, I've only spent 6 months with our women's program before the COVID-19. We saw a few, up until we actually stopped, all that, we just about got all our athletes through injury, so we were in a really good place. For me, it wasn't so much rib stuff this year. I suppose with the men's program at Cambridge, we did see a few rib injuries throughout the 3 years that I was there. It's not, for me, I haven't seen so much whether it's more a male or a female thing, and there may be, but I haven't seen it so much. I suppose when you're thinking about female athletes as well, it's hormone cycles, nutrition, they all play a key factor in injuries, and just making sure that your female athletes are aware of their hormone cycles and their own body, so that they know when they might be a little bit more susceptible to injuries and when they might be able to push on a little bit more.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Shall I jump to the next slide?
Yeah, let's go for it.
There we go. So we're sticking with coaching the basics still. I think we had quite a few questions about what makes a good catch and what a splash should look like, V-splash, that kind of stuff. I know what for you, what when you're coaching a catch, what are you looking for, or how do you get there?
I suppose making sure that the simplest way of doing it is thinking about making sure the blade is in where you reach. There's no point in reaching to a certain point with the outside hand, having the blade in the air, deciding to push, and the blade comes into the water about 2 or 3 feet later. That's just wasted. So, making sure that the blade goes in where you reach is fundamental. Now, whether you're thinking about the 8 or the pair or the 4, the way you approach the application of work can be very different. So, if we think about it in the pairs and the singles, they're so slow that if you try and collect too much pressure or really boot that front end too early, it gets really heavy in it, and actually it starts to kick the boat, and the boat won't. It'll just you'll be up on your shoulders, and you'll not be able to deliver the power right. Whereas if you shift it to the 8 is so fast that when it's up and running, trying to keep up with the work is really important. So you almost have to feel like once the blade's in, the pressure has got to be on straight away. And that goes back to what you were saying at the beginning and what you think about at UL, about making sure that you get the pressure right at the beginning, you try and hold it the whole way through. Have you got any drills that you would do to make sure that, to try and reinforce some good catch technical points?
Yeah, I mean, I think I already alluded to it, that I don't think people should ignore rowing in 6s and 4s, but if they're doing a lot of training in the 8. I think the boats are moving a bit slower, but there's enough boat moving around that if they feel like they're putting too much weight on the foot stretcher, and probably should prefix that by saying I don't look at a nice V catch or a splash or anything. I know we've got a nice image up on the screen taken, I think, from Hammersmith Bridge in the head, and I'm sure that the kids in that 8 love that catch picture, but we don't go out and work on the catch and the blade work. We go out and work on light pressure on the foot plate at the front, and then getting that pressure on as soon as we can, and then hopefully a good looking catch for when they want to download a photo. That's the result. But I think 6s and 4s, when you're rowing the 8, you've got to use them. And from there, as long as you say your bow pair aren't rowing, they need to be alert and feel what the other 6 guys are doing. It shouldn't be time for them to switch off. And as you roll and cycle the pairs down the 8, you should be coaching the two guys or girls who aren't rowing just as much, and making them feel, right, is there more pressure there? Is the stern getting stalled? You can coach the cocks as well. If you've got a good cock, you should be talking to them. They should be feeling, is that weight too heavy on the front? You don't need to go and spend a lot of money on a Peach telemetry system to see what the check is on the boat. If you just run your launch next to the cocks, if you're confident on your launch, swing it alongside, stick it alongside the coxswain, and watch whether that weight's being pushed down into the front or not. And that's really good feedback, because the rowers in the middle of the boat can look out and see, right, the launch is really getting on top of us here. Nope, that's better. Light on the foot plate, handles going in nice and quick. So for me, the whole thing is about weight. And I do love roll-ups, and I think roll-ups are really important. But in the same way, if you're rowing in the 8, ticked on the tideway, and the shell's going quite quick, so it means the deceleration is going to be quite high if you get it wrong. And if your rower's alert and on it, they'll be able to feel that, and that's a constant skill they can generate. So moving basic drills like rowing in the 6s, rowing the 8, being really aware, I think is super important. I did just say it though, standing still drills like the roll up are great. And if you're rowing somewhere like on the Wallingford stretch or the Tideway and you find you've got to spin maybe 2-3 times an outing, like there's plenty of time there to do some roll ups. So if a pair hasn't done a good job, you get them to do a few roll ups. So a combination of the two really. There's nothing. I'm sure no one's watching never heard of a roll up or rowing in 6s, but I think they're things you've got to use.
Yeah, I think you made some really good points there. I think I was going to just emphasize the idea of doing the roll ups, making sure that the crew, the pair, the 4, the 8, or the even in a single you're doing it, but in the double or the quad you're rolling together, you're getting that placement together, and actually trying. I think in the 8s as well, you've got the benefit of having the cox, and the cox is that link between the coach and the crew, and they almost have to coach as well. And I think making sure you spend enough time with the coxes to let them know what you're looking for, what you're looking to achieve. And when they get it and when the crew gets it, they know exactly what it feels like. And a cox should never feel like they're being kicked up and down the racetrack. That's not it. They want to, once the boat's up and running, they want to feel like they're being carried the whole way. And that just means that the timing is perfect on the front, and the pickup with the speed of the hull and the pressure on the face of the blade is absolutely perfect as well. And just running through those drills, again, reinforce in 6s is such a good way, dropping down to legs only, half legs, and then as you go throughout the season, dropping into maybe even shorter slide as well is really good way of trying to reinforce that point. But if good thing is, if you're all going to do something wrong, make sure you do it together. If you're going to do something right, make sure you do it together, and fundamentally making sure you do it in time, and the catch in time is really important.
Yeah. So I skip it on to this bit.
Yeah, we're rattling through quite quick. So I suppose we're trying to work through the cycle of the stroke. We worked at the finish, getting the preparation, the pickup, the catch as well, and now on to the drive phase. And one of the big things that you see in a lot of rowers is it all goes up into the shoulders, and as humans, when we want to feel work, we want to feel it in our arms, we want to feel it in our shoulders. That's what quite a lot of rowers, they go to the arm curl bar. They like to do the arm curls in the weights room. They like to feel like they're getting lots of work, and we'll feel in the boat that we're getting lots of pressure and lots of work on if we feel it in our shoulders, but it takes away from the leg drive and the hip drive. And it's really important that we try and teach our rowers to drop their shoulders, relax their shoulders, so that we can use the legs much more effectively. As soon as the shoulders go up, it takes away from the legs, and the legs are such a powerful muscle group. That's why we do all the squats. That's why we do all the power cleans. So it's really important that we keep the shoulders relaxed and hold them down. Hugo, if you get any drills that you think about or do to try and keep the shoulders down, keep the shoulders relaxed, or get athletes to think about not trying to take the work up high?
Yeah, I mean, I'll come to S&C in a minute because I am a massive fan of that. But post the S&C, once we get on the water, I'm a massive fan of inside arm only. I think a lot of people in the UK, it's part of our DNA, do a lot of outside arm only, and maybe the inside arm is something that's ignored a bit. If you go over to the US, you sit on the bank at the head of the Charles, you'll see a lot of crews doing inside arm only. But stand on Barnes Bridge while crews are getting ready for head of the river, and you won't see people doing those kind of drills. And I think inside arm only is a great drill for just isolating the hips and pelvis forward and pushing. And like you said, no distraction of anything else. Nothing gets in the way of your trunk, hips, legs, thighs, glutes, pushing. So I love inside arm. I think it's one of the most effective drills. But yeah, prior to that, I think we go back to the S&C. The S&C is great because you can get in, you can manipulate, and you can do stuff you can't do in the boat and get much closer and move people's scapulars around, and getting the shoulder position correct in something really basic like a bench pull or even on a pull up. That if you do that right in rowing, then it's actually quite a simple skill to take across. I think people they get in the gym and go squats and power cleans. They're definitely the exercise, but actually one of the best exercises is a pull up. And if you can find the correct way to move your scapula, get it in position, and then activate your lats, then your hips will work. So yeah, for me again, the S&C is really important. And actually, I know S&C is now a session you do, and it might be an hour you do one afternoon, but there's no harm in doing a few pull-ups and a few bench pulls just before you go out and row. You know, if you're going to boat and say you're going out in 8 and you're going to start in 4s and 6s, why not just do the skill 10 minutes earlier and just try and get everything set and right, and then, you know, take that straight into the boat. So yeah, a combination of S&C and inside arm. I think, you know, any UL athletes watching this will think, oh God, he's going on about hips and pelvis drive again. But you know, for that, and probably people can see if they've been watching for 20 minutes now, that if you do that right, that connects with what I said about getting constant pressure on the blade face. And you know, prior to that, if you're in a good position to call a slide, then you can access that pelvis, those glutes, and get the push. So hopefully you can kind of see a cycle, and it's giving away something now. So
yeah, and I just reinforce those points as well. For me, I get the athletes to think about what they're doing with their elbow much more. So I'll bring out my trusty rule again. You know, I'm at the catch. If my elbow is up, my shoulder's going to be up. But if I think about dropping my elbow down and turning my elbow down as I roll forward, when the blade's in the water, it drops the shoulders down. So if you drop the elbow down, you might feel a little bit of pressure on the outside of your outside hand. You drop the elbow down, it pulls the shoulder down. And when the blade goes into the water, you want them to feel like their lats just fill up. You know, if it feels like it's up and the shoulders here, we've got it wrong. But if the elbow's down and the shoulders are down, then they'll feel like their lats properly engaged. The lats are still a big muscle, and they can be a really supportive muscle. But I think if we really think about the elbow, and even when you're doing the pull-ups as well, we can't do pull-ups like that. We automatically pull the elbow in and pull the elbow down. So why we should be really thinking about that on the water as well. Think about the elbow and try it yourself. When you next go down to the boat club, get a blade, play about with what your elbow does when you're holding onto the handle. Elbow up, elbow down. What does it do? What does it achieve? Do you feel like you can engage your muscles a little bit better? And get your athletes to think about it as well. And also, you know, on the ergo, trying to reinforce that elbow down, rowing underarm grip is a really good way of getting them to get that feeling of what it's like to engage the lats and to fill their lats up, because it forces the elbow to drop. So quite often, if we're rolling around to 6s, I'll just get the girls to drop their outside arm to underarm grip, row with it. Okay, what does it feel like? What muscles are you engaging? Okay, when you go back to normal grip, try and replicate that feeling. Try and get that same feeling of engagement, and you might even be able to get it even greater. So keeping the shoulders down, really important to make sure we maximize the leg drive. But for me, thinking about what the elbow does is a really good way of trying to reinforce that point.
And if an athlete comes to you confused about what to do with the inside arm, I mean, how do you describe whether it should be passive, firm? I don't know. What do you say?
It should be relaxed, and going back to that rotation idea, trying to make sure we hold that rectangle. We can still keep the elbows down with both the inside and the outside, but it will bend ever so slightly. But as long as it's not kind of somewhere up around here, it's down, it's slightly bent, and it's the inside shoulder is maybe up a little bit, but making sure that it's not kind of tucked in towards the body, because that's not a strong position. It's got to be relaxed but effective. And I think as a coach, it's really important to constantly experiment with different ways of doing things, and constantly experiment with what you think is the right way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you've met me. I'm not very tall. I used to cox. I haven't done that much rowing, but I find just once the athletes have left in the morning, going to sit on the erg myself in front of the mirror and just try and position my shoulders and try and work out what I'm doing is quite important. It's definitely, I think, I say to anyone who's maybe, if they're a bit older and they haven't rowed for a few years, or if they have got a coxing background, something to do with shoulders and arms, I think you need to get on the erg and do a bit yourself. And a bit of rowing does help you work out these things. Because something like I said in the previous slide about feeling the pressure off the front and light on the foot plate, that's a skill I was developing since I was 13. But like feeling this kind of stuff with the shoulders, I'd say to any other coach, you need to go and do it yourself a bit and remind it how it feels. Shall I jump to the next slide and let you lead through on that one?
Yeah, I think we've worked our way around the whole rowing stroke as much as we can. So we emphasised at the beginning about how we work in big teams. So there's quite a few questions on coaching multiple crew boats in large teams. What's effective? Are pairs or fours effective to make the eights move fast? I suppose it's being a big part of our goal is to be successful at Henley each year and at Bucks, and to try and produce athletes for the under-23 teams are really important. And to do that, the athletes have to effectively be able to row in the pairs. So we don't really have any choice throughout the year to stay away from the pairs. The athletes find them uncomfortable because they don't move as fast. They're a little bit more twitchy and unbalanced. But for me, I think if you can, through all the drills and all the stuff that we've talked about in the previous slides, if you can master them in the pairs, then once you go into the eight and you spend a little bit of time in the eight, you'll be able to shift the eight effectively. And if you only spend time in the eight, I think at some point you will be fast, but it might get a little bit stale. And for you to be able to push to that next level, rowing in the pairs and the fours are equally as important. And also I think it's really important for the coxes as well to not always be sat in the eight, to be able to see from the outside, from the launch, what's going on, keeping the conversation with the coxes in the launch. What are you saying? What would you be thinking about? What were you trying to get the athletes to do at this point? It's really important for helping their development, but making sure that they can do a better job once they get back into it as well. What's your thoughts from a UL perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think we dictated a bit that we row on a river that's not always that friendly, and we have to row often in the dark pre-university in the mornings, 3 mornings a week. So the eight is the safest option, and with a large team, having a 2 or 3 eights out in front of you means you can coach a lot of people at once. But like you, I agree the importance of the fours and eights. The pairs and fours is really great. So what we'll try and do, and we're lucky we have access to Caversham, is we will try and do like a long weekend in the pairs, maybe a couple of times a term, and maybe a weekend in the fours where we can, and letting the athletes kind of get four sessions back to back in a weekend in a pair is really ramps the skill development up before we get back in the eight again. So, and I'm sure there are people watching who, they row somewhere where one boat class really doesn't work. So for us, we have to go and find the opportunities to row the pair and the four a bit more. But that said, for me, I think with our group, we're always trying to teach them to row the eight. I think if you look around the UK, people don't know how fast eights can go. Obviously, you look at a Brooks men's eight. That eight, often when you see their top eight, it is world class, and that shell is moving really, really, really fast. So being able to connect in a really fast moving shell is important. So yes, I love the pairs and fours and they help boat skill, but there's a separate skill for me on the other end of the scale, which is like being able to connect in a really, really fast shell. Like if you're in a really, 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 really good men's eight and you're rowing on the tideway with a fast stream behind you, that boat is absolutely flying, and being able to connect in that is a skill. So, I do like a bit of the eights rowing. We do a lot of high rate short pieces midwinter. I'm sure people must stand on the bank on the tideway and wonder why the hell 2 UL8s have gone under Chiswick Bridge in October rating 40 plus, but just 10 strokes here and there thrown in quite high, I think are important in terms of developing the ability to, everything we've spoken about over the last half hour, but also being able to get that shove on in a really fast moving boat. I remember when I rode in the US, you heard these freak stories about coaches going out and towing men's eights at speed with a launch, and they're trying to get the boat up to say like a 5:20 pace, and just watch the rowers connect, and then they disconnect the ropes and the boat shoot off. Obviously that's pretty out there, but the idea of trying to do that, the similar thing they might do if you've got a tank which is you can control the power on, you ramp the speed up on the tank and try and get the athletes to still connect. Tanks and powerful diesel driven tanks, there aren't many of them in the UK, but this idea of moving a fast moving object, which is the water, I think it's a skill that people should probably look at a little bit more in the UK. And definitely something I try and teach that boat skill.
Yeah, that's a really good point you bring up. I remember watching Paul Thompson before the 2008 Olympic Games with Catherine Granger's quad, and he was towing it along. You think, oh, well, they're out for a nice little ride, but actually he was towing it along at 6-minute pace because the ability for a woman's quad, the skill level required to row at 6 minute or 6:05, which is around their world best time, it requires a lot of skill, and you know, it might seem a little bit weird, but actually it helps your rowers and teaches them how to row at that kind of boat speed. I was, you know, I was thinking there also about the pairs and the eights. When I first went down to Brooks Women and they were in the eights quite a bit, when they went into the pairs, one thing I really noticed was they didn't talk to each other. There was no communication. What are you doing? Okay, let's try this drill. It was just go out, do it, and not talk. And I think they got so used to just listening to a cox or listening to a coach. And I think being in those smaller boats, especially the cox's boats, helps them develop their communication so that when they go into the eight, they still feel confident enough to be able to communicate, I give feedback and give good points when they're sat in different points in the boat as well. So I think communication is when you're in the small boats, communication is really key, and it's something coaches really will have to work on to make sure that they're communicating the right thing. But when they communicate, what did you say? What did you try and achieve? Do you think you achieved it? Is really important as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. When we do our kind of long weekends at Caversham in small boats, I probably don't do much technical coaching. And a bit like you said earlier, I'll let the coxes go and do that. But it's more you're trying to facilitate discussions and trying to step back and say, like, you're in a four, it's not gone very well. Talk to each other. And yeah, every year you'll have a couple of freshers come over and slag off the other guy and say that's not how it works. He's not working. And you actually have to work quite hard, I think, with the size of groups we've got, to say no, you need to take the ownership, and trying to develop self-awareness and thinking how their reactions and their feelings affect other people, and trying to work out whether they're going to say something useful. I think it's an underrated skill. And you know, if you're coming from a junior program maybe, and the coach has really drilled us, the 8 of you all year, and you come from a small school, like your thought process has been quite this way, and suddenly you'll get thrown into a big university program like ours, and like there's quite a few ideas bouncing around, and there'll be an older guy saying, no, this is the way you do it. So you've then got to challenge him to help the boat but not disrupt it. And yeah, I think developing those self-awareness skills are really, really good. And actually, you know, we both work in education effectively, and that is a skill for life. So you know, if you turn up and you're a bit of a dick in your first year, and you then learn crew awareness, and by the end of your third, fourth year you've become club captain, that's going to set you really well for when you get a job in an office. Because guess what, you're going to work in an office one day and you're not going to like someone, and you have to work out how to get the best out of them. So yeah, I know we've moved away from technique here, but I believe massively in trying to teach these kind of young people how to work with each other and get the best out of each other.
Right. Shall we shift it on to the next one?
Yeah. Oh, so this is kind of UL focused question came in, and we use some software called Ludum, which I'm sure some people are aware of. It's a training management tool effectively. Some people might use something like Training Peaks if they know anything about triathlon. I know some rowing programs use it. And the questions were kind of along the lines of how, you know, if you're running a big team, then how do you apply what you're learning for individuals? And yeah, I definitely am more the side that if you get everyone doing the same thing, then you'll get more buy-in. But we do need to taper to individuals a bit. So you know, we can adjust people's program, but often, and there's a little graph on the page now, you can see the trends are roughly similar, and you can get a track on how the group's going. In terms of managing performance, and I think one question asked about time scale on performance, we can use it for seasonal reviews, as we've just done on a slightly shorter season, mid-season, monthly reviews. But you know, day to day, I still think you rely on coaches' intuition, and that's maybe where you need to peel the layers back a bit and say, actually, if your intuition is built by the data you're seeing, and actually Ludum helps you see the data, not just seasonally, mid-season, every month, but it helps you manage the data at the end of the day, and you can start to go, right, her heart rate's too high, and you use your intuition and go, I know they've got exams today. So it helps build a picture both on a micro scale and a macro scale. So yeah, it is really effective and it does really help. But yeah, I think when you're sitting here as a chief coach with 50, 60, 70 plus athletes, you have to put it in here along with all the other data, and it helps you manage data, but also helps build a picture. But I'm sure every coach watching knows that yeah, sometimes you need to develop a bit of intuition anyway, and this probably helps that. So I hope that answer is useful. I'll jump to the next slide for you.
Okay, so I think this was the last one. We've got quite a few questions on team management. And we tried to group together how you manage a competitive training environment alongside academic commitments. Hugo talked a little bit about how we work in the academic side of things. Well, actually, when we discussed this, we realized that education was a large part of education of the athletes is a large part of what we do, making sure that when they first arrive in as freshers, that they, it's a whole new world for them, new living, new friends, new course, new rowing program. Time management, I think, is one of the most important things. And also, you've got to give your freshers about 5 or 6 weeks of leeway to make sure that they know where they're supposed to be. They understand, excuse me, they understand travel time between lectures in the gym and different things like that. So time management is really important. And then as you get into the season, nutrition as well. And I think especially, for all our athletes at the high end, it's really important, especially with female athletes, just working around the nutrition, making sure that they're well prepared, they're thinking about their meals throughout the week. Quite often, student athletes haven't got the opportunity every day to just prepare a fresh meal. So a little bit of meal planning at the beginning of the week plays into time management as well. And also just having those conversations each evening. Quite often our gym sessions won't finish until 7:30 or 8 o'clock, or sometimes even later, because there'll be some of them being at lectures. Easy question: what are you having for dinner? What do you enjoy to eat? What are you doing this evening for dinner? Just to get them thinking about what they're doing, and then you can start to have those conversations about, well, you've just done this training session, so you will need to eat this, and just making sure that you're getting them to think about it, so they're not going away and having a pot noodle for dinner, but actually some good substance, because it will really help them get the most from the session they've just had, but to be able to be on their best the next day, to be alert for lectures, to be awake at the right time, and then also to make sure that they're doing some really good training when they come to you again in the evening. Hugo, do you want to mention a little bit on anti-doping?
Yeah, so I think education around anti-doping is obviously massive, and we both work in British rowing funded programs, so it's a bit more prevalent. But yeah, I think everyone who joins us as a fresher, I don't think they're always quite aware, unless they've been through the junior trial system, about anti-doping. And you will see people using non-batch tested and non-informed sport logoed energy gels. So, and this probably goes back to what you said a bit, Rich. I think if we want to get the most out of our freshers, then probably knowing a bit more about anti-doping, and actually not just anti-doping but supplement use, that then ties in with nutrition and what's best for them, would really help. That I think both programs, we get freshers who, like you said, just can't work out what's going in the first 4 or 5 weeks, and you go, have you eaten after the session? And one kid will say, I haven't eaten for 6 hours. Another kid will say, I've got this bag of amazing shakes, and but I've also got no money left for my student loan. So then you're looking and going, well, you've got these expensive shakes, and has that got the Informed Sport logo on? So yeah, and actually, could have not boiled some eggs or bought some milk, and you're trying to bring an expensive sport, particularly if you're struggling on your student loan. So yeah, trying to get the education in before they arrive, in terms of anti-doping, but supplement use, nutrition, and all that kind of stuff is really important. I'll touch on time management a bit as well, which is we're a bit different to most programs. We can up to a third of our lot can be medics and junior doctors and medical students, but that is tough, and trying to get your time management right there is really difficult. And we can definitely see a period where someone might have a placement and they're really under a load of stress, and they haven't worked out how to get the training done, eat, get the train, maybe have a nap here. Their time management is all over the place. So educating them about that and saying, actually, look, like you said, get your food ready the night before, or on Sunday, cook up your meals, and that will set them well for life. With the COVID stuff going on, I've spoken to some of our alumni who are all doctors, and they're working insane shifts, and the time management skills they learned right back at UL are now setting them in really, really good stead. So yeah, I think hopefully I've kind of touched all three there, but I definitely feel the three things are connected. And if you're going to send rowers up from a junior program to a university program, you want them to get the most out of that university program when they arrive in the first year, ideally. And so if you can get these building blocks in place, that'd be super.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that's really good. And just to finish, I think this is our last slide before we go to questions. Is just making sure both our programs, they want to be as successful as we can be. We want to beat each other. We want to we want to make sure that we want to try and win Henley. We want to try and win at Bucks and all the races that we enter, but a big part of team management and our team is making sure that they really enjoy what they do. And when they come down to the rowing, yes, it is pressurized because they're maybe thinking about selection, but it's got to be really enjoyable as well, and they've got to enjoy what they do. And I think that's probably one of the key fundamental things for us is if the rowers come down, they enjoy it and they can see value in it, well then actually they're gonna commit much more to it and be faster at the end of the day for it. Hey, look, that was great.
We've been going for 50 minutes now, so I don't know if Dan's going to step back in with some questions for the final 5-10 minutes.
Hi guys. Firstly, thanks very much. That was a fascinating and fantastic conversation to be privy to, and I'm sure everyone else that's on the call and subsequently people that watch it later on YouTube will really enjoy this. Just there's a couple of questions that have come in, and please, if you haven't put your question in yet, please chuck it in now. What will happen is I will collate these and then pass them on to Hugo and Richard in the either probably tomorrow, and then I'll ask them just to fill in an answer, and maybe we'll put that on the website. So as I say, we've only got a couple of minutes now just to get this done before 8 o'clock. But I'll start you off with this one, guys, and either of you can take it. It's you've touched a lot about the technical stuff and the team management and talking about boats and athletes as in one sense, but how do you get them to buy in mentally and emotionally to technical changes and the technical model that you want?
I'll let you go there, Rich.
Good question. How do you get them to buy into it? I think, you know, when you're trying to explain it, you're trying to explain to them how it's going to make them go faster, and they've got to understand that by making a technical change, actually, it's going to feel it's going to feel really uncomfortable to start off with, and quite often you'll go slower with a technical change, but your ability to then progress and go faster is greater. And I suppose to help athletes buy into changes, try and find one or two little things that you can ask them to change, that they then start to see manifest itself in boat speed. And once you have that trust and you have that respect from them, then they're more than likely going to listen to you in future and try and adapt to those changes. You will always find one or two athletes that's really difficult, but you know what? That's actually part of the joy of coaching, is trying to figure out how they respond and how they operate and how they're, what's really interesting is when you're coaching an 8, you can't just say, if you're trying to make a technical point, you can't just say it in one way, because people think about things in different ways. Your engineer will think about things in a different way to a historian or a medic. So you've got to find different methods of communicating a certain technical point to try and get it across. And you'll not always get it right, but that's part of the fun of coaching, is trying to figure out how to communicate and get say one technical point across to a whole team. In terms of, and hopefully from there they'll buy into it. Hugo, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was going to jump to some of the under 23 coaching we do, where you might only get a crew for 2 or 3 weeks before you then jump on a plane and fly out to the championships. And like, you do have to break down a crew and almost make it go a tad slower to begin with, like you said. And you're quite lucky when you're working in under 23s that the rowers you get are really good and they know how to row. It's funny how good rowers go fast, but you're trying to make sure you get the buy-in to them before you say, look, if you all do this the same, then we will go fast. And getting the buy-in is the first challenge, I feel, in the first 2 or 3 days when you take on a kind of 2-3 week project under 23s. You're not trying to teach them that we're going to row like this, we're going to do this. You just start with conversations about what are we going to get out of the next 3 weeks, next month? What do we want to do when we get to championships? What sucked about last year's experience? What do you want to do differently? Yeah, what are your experiences this season? What can you bring to the boat? So I think conversations that enfranchise the athletes in the first 2 or 3 days of those projects are really important. And to take that to the big picture of the year ahead, I think that's why you've got to facilitate conversations between the rowers in the first couple of months of the year. I think when we come in and we've rowed the 8s on the first kind of morning sessions in September, you've got to bring the eights together, let them talk to each other, maybe let the coxes run some conversations, and then bring them back in. And once again, you're effectively a teacher, and you're trying to facilitate discussions between them. But getting the rowers to talk to each other, talk about what didn't go right, or what didn't go, what did they screw up, and then get them to admit they screwed up, and then having respect for the guy who said they screwed up. That kind of stuff goes a long way after you get 9-10 months down the road.
Dan, you're on mute, I think.
I think that's the first time I've done that on these webcams. Right, guys, thank you ever so much. I think we're running very short on time, and I'll allow the questions just to trickle in, and if I'm sure you'll be happy answering those ones, you know, and we can put them on the website afterwards. So all it falls for me is to say thank you very much to Hugo and Richard. Thank you very much to everyone else that has turned up tonight and listened in. I hope you've picked up some gems. Keep safe out there. Good luck for your return to rowing, and I hope to see you on a future webinar soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.